Hi, kids. Welcome to Story Time. Today we want to look at a story called He's Here, the Light of the Whole World. Christmas is just a few days away, and we'll be getting and giving gifts, and how much fun that would be. But let's not forget whose birthday it is. Could we wish him a happy birthday? Do that with me. Happy birthday, Jesus! God's gift to us was Jesus. And he came as a baby, and he was born into this world. A baby who would be king. Can you imagine that? Let's read the story. Once again, it's called He's Here. Everything was ready. The moment we'd been waiting for was here at last. God was coming to help his people, just as he promised in the beginning. But how would he come? What would he be like? What would he do? Mountains would have bowed down. Seas would have roared, trees would have clapped their hands, but the earth held its breath. As silent as snow falling, he came in, and when no one was looking, in the darkness, he came. There was a young girl who was engaged to a man named Joseph. Joseph was the great-grandson of King David. One morning, this girl was minding her own business when suddenly a great warrior of light appeared right there in the room. He was Gabriel, and he was an angel, a special messenger from heaven. When she saw the tall, shining man standing there, she was frightened. "You don't need to be scared," Gabriel said to her. "God is very happy with you." Mary looked around to see if perhaps he was talking to someone else. "Mary," Gabriel said, and he laughed with such gladness that Mary's eyes filled suddenly with tears. "Mary, you're going to have a baby, a little boy. You will call him Jesus. He is God's own son. He is the one. He is the rescuer. The God who flung planets into space and kept them whirling around and around. The God who made the universe with just a word. The one who could do anything at all. He was making himself small and coming down as a baby. Wait, God was sending a baby to rescue the world? But it's too wonderful, Mary said, and felt her heart beating hard. How can it be true? Is anything too wonderful for God? Gabriel asked. So Mary trusted God more than what her eyes could see, and she believed. "I am God's servant," she said. "Whatever God says, I will do." Here's a picture. Can you see? Mary's there and the angel. Whatever God says, I will do. Sure enough, it was just as the angel had said. 9 months later, Mary was almost ready to have her baby. Now Mary and Joseph had to take a trip to Bethlehem, the town King David was from. But when they reached the little town, they found every room was full and every bed was taken. "Go away," the innkeeper told them. "There isn't any place for you." Where would they stay? Soon Mary's baby would come. They couldn't find anywhere except an old, tumble-down stable. So they stayed where the cows and the donkeys and the horses stayed. See Mary and Joseph on their way to Bethlehem, riding on the donkey. There was no place for them to stay. And there, in the stable, among all the chickens and the donkeys and the cows, in the quiet of the night, God gave the world this wonderful gift. The baby that would change the world was born, his baby son. Mary and Joseph wrapped him to keep him warm. They made a soft bed of straw, and they used the animal's feeding trough as his cradle. And they gazed in wonder at God's great gift, wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in the manger. Mary and Joseph named him Jesus, Emmanuel, which means God has come to live with us, because, of course, he had. See here in the manger, all the animals and baby Jesus in the manger with the straw. That same night, among the other stars, suddenly a bright star appeared. Of all the stars in the dark heavens, this one shone clearer. It blazed in the night and made other stars look pale beside it. God put in there when his baby son was born to be a spotlight shining on him, lighting up the darkness and showing the people the way to him. You see, God was like a new daddy. He couldn't keep the good news to himself. He had been waiting all these long years for this moment, and now he wanted to tell everyone. See the shepherds? See the star in the sky that led them? The shepherds weren't very far away. So he pulled out all the stops. He sent an angel to tell Mary the good news. He put a special star in the sky to show where his son was. And now he was going to send a big choir of angels to sing his happy song to the world. He's here. He's come. Go and see him, my little boy. Now, where would you send your splendid choir? To a big concert hall, maybe? Or a palace, perhaps? God sent his to the hillside, outside a little town in the middle of the night. He sent all those angels to sing for a raggedy old bunch of shepherds watching their sheep outside of Bethlehem. In those days, remember, people used to laugh at shepherds and say they were smelly and call them other rude names, which we possibly can't mention here. You see, people thought shepherds were nobodies, just scruffy old riffraff. But God must have thought the shepherds were very important indeed, because they were the ones he chose to tell the good news to first. That night, some shepherds were out in the open fields warming themselves by a campfire when suddenly the sheep darted. They were frightened by something. The olive trees rustled. "What was that?" they exclaimed. They turned around, standing in front of them, a huge warrior of light, blazing in the darkness. "Don't be afraid of me," the bright shining man said. "I haven't come to hurt you. I've come to bring you happy news for everyone, everywhere. Today, in David's town, in Bethlehem, God's son has been born, and you can go see him. He's sleeping in a manger." Behind the angel, they saw a strange glowing cloud. Except it wasn't a cloud, it was angels, troops of angels armed with light. And they were singing a beautiful song. "Glory to God be fame and honor and all our hoorays." Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the angels left. The shepherds stamped out their fire, left their sheep, raced down the grassy hill, through the streets of Bethlehem, down the narrow cobble street, through a courtyard, down some steps, more steps, past an inn, around a corner, through a hedge, until at last they reached the stable. See the picture here? Can you see? The shepherds and the angels all singing. What a glorious time that must have been. But I'll bet they were scared. They caught their breath after running. Then suddenly they tiptoed inside. They knelt on the dirt floor. They had heard about this promised child, and now here he was, heaven's son, the maker of the stars, a baby sleeping in his mother's arms. This baby would be like that bright star shining in the sky that night, a light to light up the whole world, chasing away darkness, helping people to see. And the darker the night got, the brighter the star would shine. Here's a picture again. Can you see? Mary and Joseph and the baby and the animals, the shepherds, they came to see the baby. Far away in the east, there were 3 clever men saw the very same star, the star that God had put in the sky when Jesus was born. They knew it was a sign a baby king had been born. They had been waiting for this star. They knew it would come. "He's here," they shouted. "He's here." And I'm sure if you had been there, you would have heard them laughing and dancing and singing until the sun came up. At dawn, they packed up their camels. They wrapped gifts for the baby. They brought their most precious treasures of all, frankincense, gold, and myrrh, special, sparkly, lovely smelling, gleaming things, just right for a king. See him? 3 wise men. We don't really know if there was 3, but there was 3 gifts. The 3 wise men, actually, if you'd met them, you'd have thought they were kings because they were so rich and clever and important. They rode their camels across the endless desert, up steep, steep mountains, down into the deep, deep valleys, through the raging rivers and over the grassy plains. Night and day, day and night, for hours that turned into days and turned into weeks and turned into months, until at last they reached the place they were going. See it? Got all their stuff and their camels. Have you ever ridden a camel? Wouldn't that be fun? But until at last they reached Jerusalem. Jerusalem was by far the most important city for miles around, as anyone can tell you. That's where a palace would be, and kings are born in palaces, so that's where they went. But they were in for a big surprise. They went to see King Herod. Surely he'd know where the baby was, but he didn't. In fact, he didn't like the sound of a new king. It made him angry. He didn't want anyone to be king except himself. But Herod's advisors told the 3 wise men that was written in their books that God had said about the baby king. They said, "Go to Bethlehem. That's where you'll find him." Suddenly, the star that they had seen in the east started moving again, showing them the way. So the 3 wise men followed the star out of the big sky, along the road into the little town of Bethlehem. They followed the star through the streets of Bethlehem, out of the nice part of town, through the not so nice part of town, into a really not nice part of town, down a little dirt track until it stopped right over a little house. But wait, it wasn't a palace, and there weren't any guards or servants or flags, red carpet or trumpets or anything. Did they get it wrong? Or was this what God meant? Sure enough, in that little house there, sitting on his mother's knee, they found him, the baby king. See the picture? Jesus sitting on Mama's lap. The 3 men knelt down before the king, and they took off their rich royal turbans and gleaming golden crowns. They bowed their noble heads to the ground and gave him their sparkling treasure. The journey that had begun so many centuries before had led these wise men here, to a little town, to a little house, to a little child. To the king God had promised David all those years before. But this child was a new kind of king. Though he was the Prince of Heaven, he had become poor. Though he was mighty God, he had become helpless. This king hadn't come to be the boss. He had come to be a servant. And so we read the story about Jesus and how he came to this earth. Wasn't that a great story? But more than that, it was a true story. Jesus, when he grew up, said, "I've come to give you life, and life more abundantly." So as we receive and give presents, let's not forget whose birthday once again that it is, and that we have received the greatest gift of all. John 3:16, the Bible tells us, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believed in him would have everlasting life." You and I can have that everlasting life. Thanks for listening to this story. Love you, kids. Bye-bye.